day. So here we are. Today is the 17th of January, 2024. I have to keep checking. I don't say 2023 anymore. Today is the day we transition from the days of the birch tree into the days of the Rowan tree. So the second tree of the year. And this presentation is about the goddess Brigid, Brid, Brigantia, by many different names, not just the Irish goddess Brigid, but I'm going to put a presentation about things that people might not be aware of. You know, there's a ton of information, and so this is quite a complicated PowerPoint, and good job it's being recorded so you can watch it again on YouTube. So this year we're focusing on studying which gods and goddesses are appropriate for each tree of the Ogham. Now, this is our third year round, and on YouTube there's the Ogham Grove YouTube channel, and there's already 2 videos for the Rowan tree. So if you type in Rowan and 2022, you're going to get a video about the basic lore of the Rowan tree, and there's also some basic Brigid lore to do with Imbolc and stuff in there. And if you type in Rowan tree 2023, you're going to find a video about medicine and herbalism to do with the Rowan tree. So having said that, I don't want to do a beginner's video on Brigid. It's nice to get a bit deeper into the complexity of different things. But although most people are familiar with the Irish Brigid, there are others as well. So I'm just going to bring up a PowerPoint presentation. I've got quite a few pictures to share. Okay, so variations on the name Brigid. So across Europe, or certainly the Atlantic side of Europe, there's the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain. And there is evidence there, I think it's on coins, Iron Age coins, of Briganton. It's interesting. And in Gaul, there's the goddess Brigindo, or Brigindo. In Britain, Brigantia. In Ireland, Brigid, Brid. In Scotland, Bridie. And in Celtic tongues, B and V for victory are interchangeable. So in Wales, they say Freid or Freed. Double F is a kind of V sound. So in South Wales, you have St. Bride's Bay, and Llan San Freed is the church of St. Bride and stuff. But these are variations of the goddess that we're looking at today. Now, the root of the name is thought to be what they call Proto-Celtic. It's speculation, academic speculation, and Briganti is thought to be Proto-Celtic for the High One or the Exalted One. So all of those variations on the name, they're variations because of different tribal groups of people and different regional dialects. But the common root amongst them all is the High One or the Exalted One, Briganti. Now, another thing for the year ahead, exploring gods and goddesses and relating them to the trees and the Ogham Grove. I'm going to show a different treasure from the ancient world with each Zoom session. And the last session for the birch tree, I showed this one. So I'll just go over it again. It's the 12 gods of ancient Rome, known as the Diconsentes. And also there's a Greek equivalent called the 12 Olympians. But basically, each of the 12 signs of the zodiac corresponded with a Greek or Roman deity, god or goddess. pantheon, you know. So, but simplistically, the zodiac is a year wheel. So there's gods and goddesses that relate to different times of the year. And we can apply that or take some inspiration from that for the Ogham Grove, because the Ogham Grove is a year wheel as well. There's understanding why does this god or goddess correspond with that group of stars or that time of year. So that was the treasure for the last session we did. If you haven't seen the birch tree video about Ellen of the Ways 2024, it's on YouTube. So before I show you this treasure, the treasure for this session, this isn't it. This is just to explain something called the ecliptic. So the ecliptic, you can see it's written on the left-hand side of that purple circle. Planet Earth, the blue planet in the middle of the screen, orbits around the sun. And it takes a whole year to do that, you know, basic astronomy. But as planet Earth goes around its orbit, it creates the optical illusion that the sun is traveling around the signs of the zodiac. So the imagined pathway of the sun throughout the year is called the ecliptic. So it's just another way of kind of seeing the year wheel through the perspective of astronomy. So that treasure from last time with the 12 gods in a circle represents the whole wheel of the ecliptic. Some people call it the ecliptic. My background in Glastonbury, people just called it the golden wheel. The golden wheel because it's the wheel of the sun, and the sun is gold and doesn't tarnish and is eternal in that way. So it's this golden wheel made by the sun each year as it travels through the stars. So this is the treasure for this session. Now this thing, it's hard to see. I've got some better pictures in a minute. It's a kind of astrology plaque or table, and it's in the Louvre Museum in France. Dates back to the 3rd or 4th century Romano Gaul, and it's called in the museum the Tabula Bianchini. And so you can Google that and look it up for yourself, this treasure. Now, it was found broken into lots of pieces. I think it had been thrown down a well. And so they only salvaged bits of it, but they salvaged enough to stick it back together and figure out what was missing. So here's an illustration that shows it. The darker orange pieces coming down the middle are the bits they salvaged, and the faded surrounding is the guesswork. But there was enough information to show that it was concentric zodiac wheels. But what's really interesting is the outer circle. Each sign of the zodiac is divided into 3. There's 3 figures or 3 spirits for each zodiac section. So that then divides the ecliptic into 36. So the zodiac divides the ecliptic into 12 divisions of 30 degrees. But this treasure has what they call the 36 decans. So each zodiac sign of 30 degrees has 3 10-degree sections, creating 36 decans. The main thing is it's an example of divine influences around the wheel of the year, gods and goddesses, and also personifications of the planets. So personifications of Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn as well. So it's not just the zodiac signs, but it's deified planets or planets representing deities, however you want to look at it. But it's basically what we're looking for, which is to use the Ogham Grove as a circle of gods and goddesses for your own magical work, for your own meditations, that you have your own Ogham Grove inside of you. You build it yourself with your imagination and you interact with it in a kind of shamanic way. And it's a sacred grove that you can put your heart and mind into, but each tree is also a shrine to a god or goddess. So that's the idea of this year, if you like. So the previous session, we looked at the birch tree and how it related to Ellen of the Ways and other sovereignty goddesses. So it's not just Ellen of the Ways, and now we're looking at the Rowan tree and how it can relate to Brigid, but also other variations of Brigid, like Brigantia, but also the classical deities as well. So for you and you alone in your own magical workings, it's up to you which god or goddess you make a shrine to under each tree. You know, so this is just an exploration to give you ideas to make your grove your own. So here's the basic layout of the Ogham Grove then. So you can see how it's the circle of the year. And I haven't put 36 decans. That was just an example of how different systems divide the sun's golden wheel into different sections. It can be divided into 4: winter, spring, summer, autumn. You know, it can be divided into 8 with the Celtic fire festivals. The zodiac divides it into 12, the decans divide it into 36, and I would argue the Ogham divides it into 20. So that's the kind of basic notion for the year ahead, trying to find 20 gods and goddesses that you can make an astral shrine to for each tree. And then when you're meditating or doing whatever magic or practices you do, spiritual practices, when you're inside your grove, you're surrounded by 20 gods and goddesses that support you and look after you and hold you and so on. You know, so I'm not here for any dogma, not telling you which gods and goddesses to dedicate your trees to, but we're just exploring what might be suitable. It's important that you do it your way. Don't do it anyone else's way. So at the bottom is the yew tree. That represents or holds the position of winter solstice. And so the first tree of the year was the birch tree. And now we're transitioning, we're right on the cusp between the birch tree and the rowan tree. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that the rowan tree is the last few parts of Capricorn and the first half of Aquarius. So then we can then compare that with the Greek and Roman deities of those zodiac signs. And there's some interesting discoveries. So just to be precise about the mathematics of it, Rowan goes from the 27th degree of Capricorn to the 15th degree of Aquarius, which is the cross-quarter fire festival of Imbolc. So Rowan takes us up to the festival of Brigid, to the festival of Bridie. But Rowan has its first few days in Capricorn. They're quite interesting. So in the classical world, the goddess corresponding with Capricorn in Greece was Hestia, and in Rome was Vesta. And so the goddess, if you like, of the birch tree, from a classical perspective, would be Vesta or Hestia. And she takes us into the days of Rowan, because Rowan, the first few days, are still in Capricorn. And the main symbol of Vesta is this eternal flame that she's holding. So on the left, you can see a traditional image of Vesta holding the flame. And it's exactly the same as the more modern statue of Saint Brigid at Kildare, holding the same eternal flame. So as far as iconography goes, you would almost say they're the same statue. It's a holy woman holding an eternal flame. What's the difference? That there is none really, just cultural. But what's interesting is that Vesta corresponds with the tree that's going to take us to Imbolc, Bridie's festival. So that's quite an interesting thing to think about. He's not here tonight. JJ mentioned last time that in British culture, before people started to quit smoking, the most common, most popular brand of matches was Swan Vesta. And it's really interesting because the main symbol is the swan, which corresponds with Capricorn as well, and Bridie. And it is literally Vesta, you know, that's the eternal flame, the goddess of the eternal flame, or the goddess of the sacred flame, was there in British culture, albeit hidden in plain view, but everybody lighting up a cigarette has probably used the sacred flame of Vesta with her swan to smoke. Yeah, interesting how symbols are carried through. So, just sticking with Capricorn, the first few days of the Rowan tree, each section of the wheel of the year, here for Capricorn, there's the main sign, which would be Capricorn or Aquarius or Sagittarius on the ecliptic. See, it says ecliptic on the left-hand side with the circumference that's doing dashes. So that's showing you the sun's path, the golden path the sun makes is the ecliptic. So the piece of cake that corresponds with Capricorn also has other constellations. And at the top, you will see the brightest star in this area is Deneb, the brightest star of Cygnus the Swan. So Cygnus the Swan, and the symbol of the swan, belongs to Capricorn, to which the goddess of the sacred flame also corresponds. Now, a curious thing just in passing is the pale blue area across this picture is the Milky Way. And you'll see that there's a dark river splitting it. So, this is actually taking you to the vulva of the star goddess Nuit. The two pale bits were seen as her legs, and where the legs divide, which is where Deneb, the bright swan, is the vulva of the star goddess, or the great river goddess, because the Milky Way is seen as a river. And it's interesting that in the last session with the birch tree, we were mainly talking about Ellen, but we were talking about Maeve, the sovereignty goddess of Ireland, and how many sacred water features are in English Maeve's vulva, and also that Ireland has over 100 Sheila na Gigs statues of a female figure holding herself open. Now, if the Sheila na Gigs and Maeve's vulvas as sacred water features are a thing, and they seem to be, then it's interesting that the swan is flying out of the vulva of the star goddess at that time of year with Capricorn. There's interesting iconography written in the heavens, the sacred yoni and the swan, the heavenly swan and the heavenly river are there written in the stars for the time of year of the birch tree and the beginning of the Rowan tree. So the first 3 degrees of Rowan are Capricorn, and the following 15 degrees, each tree has 18 degrees. So the following 15 degrees of the Rowan tree are the sign of Aquarius. Now, going back to those treasures of the ancient world, Capricorn belongs to Vesta, but we're now in Aquarius, and the Rowan tree is mostly Aquarius. And the classical goddess or deity, it's just a goddess, for Aquarius, to the Greeks was Hera, and to the Romans, Juno. And both Hera and Juno are the queen of the gods. So, it's the highest ranking goddess, if you like, in that classical world perspective. Now, here's an interesting thing. Whilst the Proto-Celtic speculation of the word Briganti is high one or exalted one, there's another bit of word stuff we can look at, and this is another Proto-Celtic word, and it's Regan, and Regan means queen. It's a Celtic word for queen. So Hera and Juno, queen of the gods, and Regan would be the Celtic equivalent of queen. Now, another look then at how the word Regan is hidden in the names of many Celtic goddesses. Brigantia holds Regan, the great queen, the most high, the exalted one. More Regan. More just means, sometimes it means the ocean, but it also just means vast and great. So more Regan can be great queen as well. A speculated, again, Proto-Celtic word is Regantona. Again, it's just another way of saying the great queen or the queenly one. But theoretically, it's the origin of the goddess Rhiannon. The G gets dropped, like the G in Ogam becomes Oam, and the Celts always drop their T's. So I say water and not water and stuff. So Regantona gets softened into Rhiannon. The G gets dropped and the T gets dropped. And then Rhiannon isn't a far cry from Ariane Rod. So it's just an example. It's curious that queen word Regan, regal, is there in the names of many goddesses. A different perspective on Ariane Rod is that Ariane is thought to mean silver. So a lot of people translate it as silver wheel, but it could actually, the rod bit at the end is the wheel. So from this perspective, it could actually be the circle or wheel of the Great Queen. Different idea to silver wheel. And the Great Wheel could be the wheel of the year or the wheel of the stars or any sacred grove of Nemetona, So Ariane Row, the Queen's wheel, might be a variant on silver wheel. It's just an idea. So, before I get into some more Brigid lore, a book I really like is Herbcraft by Susan Lavender, and I've forgotten the other person's name. But in there, it's almost like a man in a pub told me, so they say that the Rowan tree is sacred to Brigid, and I just take that on surface and go along with it like most people do. And lots of websites talk about how the Rowan tree is sacred to Brigid. Now, we did volume 2 of The Grove some years ago, and it was dedicated to Brigid, and lots of people put essays in and so on. And even with all that research behind us, I do not know and cannot find any source that says the Rowan tree is sacred to Brigid. It's just urban myth, or it's just by word of mouth. There doesn't seem to be anything written down to corroborate this. But here's a curious thing then, the Ogham Grove might actually be the evidence that we're looking for, because the Rowan tree takes us to Imbolc, the festival of Brigid. So it's speculation, but it might be ironic that the Ogham is the evidence of the Rowan tree and its connection to Imbolc and therefore Brigid. That's echoed by Robert Graves in his White Goddess. because with his system of 13 trees, the Rowan tree still corresponds with Imbolc. So he talks about the Rowan tree and Imbolc and Brigid. But I can't trace it any further back than that, other than whether you're using the 13 tree system or the 20 tree system, the Rowan tree holds Imbolc. So that's interesting. So with this year, we're looking at archaeology and we're looking at mythology. They're different things, and trying to just look at the jigsaw pieces with no preconceived ideas, really, but just to lay it all out on the table and see what we've got. So this is what I found, and I've put it together as a chronology. So the earliest evidence I can find of any expression of Brigid is the 1st century BC, and it's a figurine in Gaul. It's kept in a museum at Brittany, and it's called Brigindo, though in the museum in Brittany they call her Brigid, so proper French sounding Brigid. So that's the earliest depiction, and she has a swan helmet. I've got a picture I'll show you a little further on. After that, we have what things the Romans write down, you know, so we know that there was a very big Celtic tribe in the north of Britain called the Brigantes. And they also had territory in southern Ireland, unless there's 2 tribes, both called the Brigantes, or their family kin in some way. But southern Ireland and northern Britain, the Brigantes were the tribe. And evidence suggests that the Celtic people were matriarchal. So it would only go to logic that the tribe would name themselves after their main goddess or their main mother, you know, so the Brigantes people. 2nd century too is that the Romans, maybe following Celtic perspective, we don't know, but the Romans personified the land of Britain as a goddess called Britannia, you know, and she's depicted like Minerva with a helmet and a spear and a shield. I've got some pictures to show you. 4th century, so 200 years after the coins of Britannia, there's statues and carvings of Brigantia. And she looks a lot like Britannia. She has a spear and a shield and a helmet, you know, because it's Romanized. And that's just what we're stuck with. Now, it isn't until the 5th and 6th century that the human being, Saint Brigid, is said to have lived. She was born, if she existed as a human being, she was born in the late 5th century and died in the 6th century. And she made it apparently to 74 years old as a human being. I'll talk more about Saint Brigid further on, but that's her expected lifetime. Nothing was written down about Saint Brigid until the 7th century. And they're just small bits of information. So it's various anecdotes or references to her. Just society being Christianized in Ireland from the 5th century onwards, you could say. All of the writers of the lives of the saints and also the Irish gods and goddesses were Christian scribes, and they have their own religious bias, of course. So their first intention was to write about Saint Brigid, which is what they did. And then it wasn't until the 9th century that the early medieval writing started writing about the gods and goddesses of Ireland, or the culture heroes. They humanized them. They turned them into human beings, rather than acknowledge them as pagan deities. So the medieval writings that mention the goddess Brigid, not the saint, but the goddess, start to appear from the 9th century onwards. That's the written evidence. So you've got things like the Book of Invasions, the Battle of Moytura, and the earliest one to mention Brigid is called Cormac's Glossary. That's what it's called in English. And it's from Cormac's Glossary that we get the lore of Brigid being a triple goddess, and a goddess of poetry and healing and the smith work of the forge and so on. So that comes from the 9th century stories about the Tuatha De Danann and so on. Some things come much later. So the sacred fire at Kildare wasn't written about until the 12th century. So it's 600 years after Saint Brigid lived, if she did live, that Gerald of Wales describes the 19 nuns at Kildare keeping this eternal flame burning. They're quite interesting. So I'm not denouncing any of it. To some people, she's a saint. To some people, Brigid is a goddess. This is just the chronology of the evidence for you to think about for yourself. Nowadays, certainly on websites on the internet, it all gets thrown together as one big lump, and you don't know when each bit of the ingredient came in, which bit is 5th century, which bit is 12th century, which bit is 20th century with Robert Graves. You know, you don't know, or even people like me making stuff up, you know. So it's really important to be a bit academic and just see it laid out chronologically so you can make your own intelligent evaluation of it all. Having said that, when you have your dreams and visions and shamanic work, the visions are the visions. Doesn't matter if they agree with academia or history or mythology. That's personal vision work. So this is Brigid from Brittany. She's meant to date to the 1st century BC. So she's Iron Age Celtic, and she's got a swan on her helmet. It's amazing, a lovely piece of artwork and a rare glimpse into a culture that was pretty much annihilated by Rome. You know, so the Celts of what we now call Brittany had this swan helmeted Brigid, Brigindo, Gallic version of Brigantia. Here's the tribes then. So the Brigantes were one of the biggest tribes, northern Britain. It's Yorkshire, Lancashire, Northumbria. And so, yeah, big chunk of the mainland Britain across the Irish Sea. And now if you come to the bottom east corner of Ireland, you'll also see Brigantes. So this evidence is 2nd century by a Greek cartographer called Ptolemy, did the first map of the British Isles, and he, you know, that's how we got the Celtic tribal names, tribal territories. So again, this predates Saint Brigid, predates anything written about the goddess Brigid in Ireland, that the Brigantes, the people of the High One, the people of the Great Queen, had territories in northern Britain and southern Ireland. We can't tell if they were the same tribe or that they just had the same name. Who knows? We'll never know. The corresponding part of southern Wales to the Irish southern area is called St. Bride's Bay, and it's where San Brid is, St. Brigid of Wales. What the tribal area called the Demete was really an Irish settlement. So it's like a bit of island on the coast of Wales, if you like. They were intermarried, they interacted, they traded with each other, and Bridie was celebrated on both sides of the Irish Sea there, giving her name to St. Bride's Bay. So on the left-hand side is a coin, a Roman coin from 2nd century AD, depicting Britannia with her shield, with her spear, looking quite regal and queenly almost, but she's the personification, or you could say the sovereignty goddess of the British Isles, you know. And she's lasted a long time. On the right-hand side is a modern 50p piece, and she's still there. You know, that Britannia rules the waves and all that dodgy British patriotism and stuff, but the goddess is ever present, you know, protecting her land, looking after her people and stuff. And because of the Romanization, she's like Minerva. The spear, the shield, the helmet are the Romanization elements, if you like. Although Brigitte in Brittany had a swan helmet, so kind of implies that she was willing to go on the battlefield and protect her head. In the northern part of Britain, where the Briganti tribe are, there are 8 inscriptions to the goddess Brigantia. The drawing on the left-hand side is the most famous depiction of her. It's from a place called Birons, not far from Hadrian's Wall. And she has wings, and the wings is interesting. Some people relate it to the winged goddess of Rome called Victory. So she's kind of Minerva and she's kind of Victory, but she's got her helmet and spear and shield. But the wings can also imply heavenly, like winged creatures or heavenly creatures. And on the altar, on the right-hand side, which is from Corbridge on Hadrian's Wall, there's an inscription to Brigantia, and she's actually called, it's a bit faded, Celestia, and that's the Roman Latin version of celestial. So it's actually declaring that Brigantia is celestial, heavenly, of the stars. Now that's quite interesting, especially if you relate it back to Briganti being the high one. Literally, the high is up high above everybody, the exalted one, and so on, you know, or queen of the heavens, queen of the gods. Either way, it works quite nicely. Here's a photo of St. Bride's Bay. There's a church there, and it's got Victorian stained glass windows, but it's always been called St. Bride's Bay. And the stained glass window at the church at St. Bride's Bay is this lovely depiction of Bridie. They call her Bridie there, Brigid. And Bridie, as far as I'm aware, is more of a Scots Gaelic pronunciation of her name. Old Irish is Brid, B-R-I-D, and they pronounce it Breed. And in Scotland, Bridie, or Breed. Yeah, so this Victorian window uses the Gaelic Scots version. So the saint herself then, she's known as Saint Brigid of Kildare. We'll come back to Kildare shortly. And she's also just known as Saint Brigid of Ireland. All of her life stories come from later medieval hagiography stories. There's no contemporary writing about her. But apparently she was an abbess, and she founded the abbey at Kildare and lived to be 74 years old. And she's far-reaching, of course. You know, there's Bridie connections all over the place, and Bridie's wells all over the place. And I mean British Isles and Scotland and Wales and so on, you know. So it's strange that this Irish abbess who founded an abbey should have so many wells named after her across the British Isles. You know, that's a huge influence, unless it's really versions of Brigantia or Bridie in other variations. The smoking gun with all of this is that Saint Brigid is the patron saint of poetry, healing, and smithwork. And these are characteristics of the triple goddess as well. So not only has she got the name of the triple goddess, she patron saint of the things that goddess is in charge of. So again, that's the smoking gun. That is, was she ever a real human being? Now, the most famous thing with Kildare is, of course, the eternal fire that was kept there. And that tradition was recorded in the 12th century by Gerald of Wales. You can look it up. If you Google Kildare, Gerald of Wales, you'll find it quite easily. You can read his actual words about what he says. And there's some interesting things there. You know, basically, it's this miraculous eternal flame that the nuns kept going ever since Saint Brigid died. They kept it all going. And it's miraculous in the sense that it's been going for centuries by the time Gerald of Wales wrote about it. And one of its miracles is that there's never any ash. They feed it with wood day after day, and there's never any ash, you know. Now, apparently, there were originally 20 nuns in the abbey. And that's interesting because the Ogham is 20, and it's the number of a grove. Now, what happened was, according to Gerald of Wales, is that Brigid died of natural causes, and the 19 sisters that remained kept the fire burning. But here's the second miracle. They would take it in turns, one night after another night, to keep the fire burning. But on the 20th night, it was left alone. And the nun that had just finished her duty would make a prayer and say, "This night is for you, Brigid. You must take care of the fire yourself," sort of thing. And miraculously, the fire doesn't burn out on the 20th night. And then it starts again with a nun on the first day of a new cycle. So it's 19 nuns, but 20 nights keeping this eternal flame going. Make of it what you will. Nowadays, if you look on Wikipedia, the kind of modern day pagan perspective is that Brigid was some kind of druidess that looked after a grove of the goddess Brigid, and it all got kind of merged into one thing. You make of it what you will. Kildare means Church of the Oaks, the oak tree grove, or the oak tree church and stuff. So that there is a a kind of suggestion that it's druidic, that it's a grove, it's a sacred circle. But it's really interesting how the Celtic festival of Brigid, Imbolc, corresponds with the tree that comes from the star lore of Vesta, the goddess of the eternal flame, and the constellation of the Swan. All those things, all those symbols are floating around. And then we have many, 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 many centuries of Christianity, 600 years after the human being Saint Brigid lived. Gerald of Wales describes this eternal fire. So, not denouncing it, but it's just all parts of the jigsaw puzzle. So, the goddess then was written about afterwards. The goddess Brigid wasn't written about until the 9th century. The first main manuscript source, as far as I'm aware, is called Cormac's Glossary. And it's Cormac's Glossary that describes the triple goddess, if you like. He famously says that Brigid was the goddess that poets adore. You think of the bardic poet culture of ancient Ireland. She's the main goddess then. She's the goddess of the bards. She's the goddess of the poets. She's the goddess of poetry and inspiration. So Cormac's Glossary says she's the goddess that the poets adored. And then he explains that she had two sisters, and her two sisters were also called Brigid. So all three sisters are called the High One, the Exalted One. One sister is Brigid, goddess of healing. And the other sister is Brigid, goddess of the forge, the blacksmith, the creating of things. They're all sacred fires, of course. So poetry is the fires of inspiration, the imbas, you know. Healing is the fires of healing, the creative healing. And forge, of course, is a more physical fire for making and forging things. But all expressions of Brigid as a triple goddess kind of imply this sacred fire, creative fire. So that pretty much wraps up this presentation. I just want to say a couple of things, a couple of perspectives. As well as being a triple goddess, part of the pantheonism of Ireland with the Duatha is Brigid is the daughter of the Dagda, the good god. She's the sister of Ogma, the god that invented the Ogham. And she was married to a dodgy king called Bress, and she had a son called Ruadan. So she's a mother as well, and a wife, and a sister, and a daughter. So she fulfills all those roles in a kind of divine way. Now, before I finish, there is a thing happening with the planet, and that's called the Age of Aquarius. The planet itself, due to something called the precession of the equinoxes, is transitioning from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. So Brigid, because of Imbolc, is the goddess of Aquarius. So she's going to be the figurehead for the next 2,500 years from a Celtic perspective. From the Celtic perspective, she is the great queen. She's Aquarius. She's the queen of the gods. And, you know, for the age of Aquarius is going to last 2,500 years. It's really interesting with the return of the divine feminine that it was only last year, Imbolc 2023, that various people in Ireland working together, promoting Brigid as a valid and equal counterweight to St. Patrick, they actually achieved that in the Republic of Ireland, the 1st of February is now a public holiday dedicated to St. Brigid, saint and goddess, equal to St. Patrick's Day. So that's only a year old. Well, it's not even that yet. We're not quite at the 1st of February, you know, so we're about to conclude Brigid's, her triumphant return. This is the first year, if you like, of her shining again as saint and as goddess, that, you know, you're able to actually please Christians and pagans, that she can be all things to all people. And that's really special in the coming age of Aquarius. And, you know, so, yeah, love her to pieces. She's the goddess of sacred fire and of everyone's hearth. And Aquarius pours water into the middle cauldron of everybody. That's the star law of Aquarius. So you can put your microphones back on and we can talk about any of that for the next 20 minutes or so.
Brilliant. Wonderful.
Yeah, especially the last part gave me goosebumps, like the 2.5 year ahead. I might not be there for the whole time, but as a priestess of Brigid, that makes me very happy.
Yes, thank you. I just remembered there's 2 people here, I think, Carmel and Veronica are flame bearers of Brigid. So
you can see my flame there in the background.
If Veronica or Carmel,
it's my flame night, so I come there.
yeah. Would you like to say something about what you do, Carmel or Veronica?
I have an unstable internet connection at the moment. It'll have to be Carmel, I think.
Carmel needs to unmute microphone.
Carmel, can you unmute?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? So yeah, actually there's somebody else in the group here. Angie, is she still on the screen? Yeah, it was her started it all really. But we have a group, a Facebook group, where we have 19 women. Actually, yeah, we have 19 members, and on the 20th, we each hold the flame for one night, and we say devotional prayers or whatever it is you want to do, and then it gets passed to the next person at sunset each day, and works its way through the group. And on the last day, on the 20th day, it gets handed back to Brigid, and then after her day, it gets given to the first flame keeper. So that's what we do. It's beautiful.
Is that done online or actually face to face in the real world?
It's done online, virtually.
Online.
But well, some are done online, some are done like FaceTime or WhatsApp as well in real time. So whatever you can do.
That's wonderful.
Angie?
Oh, and I just want to say as well while I'm here, I am loving this book by Yuri. I only started it today and I have not been able to put it down. It's fantastic. Brigid, The Call of Brigid, Bright Inspiration by Yuri.
So that's volume 2, and we're about to do volume 5.
Oh, wow.
As a group.
Catch up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Angie North, I don't know how, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yep. Yes, you are. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes. Yeah. It's been my honor, actually. We've been going now, believe it or not, we just started our 3rd year of keeping her flame in Brigid's Fire Temple online. Carmel took the flame and established the temple, but she and I have been chatting back and forth for years, honestly, about Brigid's flame. And bless her, in 2005, Carmel actually drove me to Kildare, where we met the nuns, the Brigadine nuns, and I received the flame from Sister Mary.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. I was able to bring it back. You see, I live on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. So right now it's daytime for me. So for me to pass the flame to my cohorts or my flame sisters and brother in Ireland, which I do, I'm basically at night, and during the daytime for me, at night for them. And so even with the time zones, we manage, because we go from, Canada to Ireland to France, where Veronica is, and then back to Ireland. It's basically it's become very global.
Yeah.
That's so lovely.
Living traditions, isn't it? Or rebirthing traditions.
I love that.
Well, can I just say, anybody can start one of these. Anybody can start one.
Oh, Mel,
you can contact Angie, Veronica, or myself, and we'll give you a seed candle that is lit from one that was lit from an original flame. And then you can just start, if you know 19 women, you can start your own grove or your own cell, as it's called as well.
That's so beautiful.
That's really lovely. How would we contact you? I'd be really interested in that.
And I'm sure Earth Mother is totally so grateful to you for doing this. Thank you very much.
We've been doing it. And I'm on the Almond Grove Facebook page anyway. So if you look me up, Veronica M.L. Smith, you can contact me through that. And yeah.
And I am
too in the chat.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
So any of us would be glad to send you a seed candle. Just let us know. Just ship us an email with your address.
Okay.
Any thoughts about the other variations of Brigid, you know, in Brittany and Roman Britain and even in Spain and so on?
There are so many.
Or the differences or similarities between the Irish saint and the Irish goddess?
Can I, sorry,
Angie?
go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Angie.
Whoever that. Okay, sorry. Yep. I just didn't want to interrupt, but if I could do a sort of a tangent here, I know you're doing the Celtic and the Irish, but because of my Scandinavian background, may I also put in a word about Santa Lucia, which is a big holiday, which she is known as the goddess of light and brings the light back to the dark. Hello, flame.
Yeah.
And apparently there's also, of course, Brigid is a Swedish name. And there is a group of nuns that are Brigid nuns that come from Sweden. And there's supposed to be ruins as well, which have Brigid's name in them.
Nice.
Along the, I think it's the Volga River, but I'll send you the link here. I have it in my notes when we're finished here. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that she made it that way because either she was brought by the Irish monks who were converting the pagans Scandinavians, or she could have been there obviously before, because the idea of Santa Lucia, originally she was the solstice, but they moved her date to December 13th because it would interfere with the big holiday on the 21st, 25th. So they moved her back in the liturgical calendar, but originally her date was the solstice, the winter solstice.
One of the things we're doing with this year is to expand the horizon of research, understanding that Celtic culture goes from the Atlantic coast all the way to Ukraine. So absorbing any insights we can get from Sweden or Belgium or Poland or anywhere, you know. So a wise lady, a lady called Lady Olivia Robertson, founder of the Fellowship of Isis.
Isis, yes.
She actually said once, it was a discussion about some people doing goddess worship one way and another group wanted to separate and go and do it a different way. And they were debating about the separation of things. And what Lady Olivia Robertson said was that the goddess never subtracts, she only ever multiplies. And that always stuck with me. So as much as we're looking at Brigid in Ireland, the Brigantia of Britain and Brittany and Spain and Sweden, that actually the high one is across the Celtic world. And we've still got a lot to learn. And it's interesting, we're in the Age of Aquarius, and Imbolc is a public holiday to Brigid, and it's the beginning of that remembering.
She's the goddess of love.
Yeah.
She's the goddess of love.
Yeah. Well, Valentine's Day is the 14th. I mean, you can't get any more loving than that for February, which I think is her month.
So. It means she likes chocolate.
Oh, yes.
I like chocolate, but I'm not so sure about February the 14th. It's very strange because in America, I know everybody gets Valentine's cards, and here in the UK, it's more, you know, male to female or lovers to lover. You know, I've never really got it, to be honest. Don't get it. But I do like chocolate, and I like roses.
I like dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Well, for our Spanish, chocolate is sacred to the gods and goddesses in the Mayan and Aztec traditions. So you're right in there with the chocolate.
Yeah, the cacao. Yeah.
The cacao, exactly.
Yeah, I did some ceremony with a lovely Mayan shaman last summer. Amazing.
Another perspective then is that the Rowan tree on the sun's ecliptic corresponds with the queen of the gods in the classical world as well. And I would extend that to Isis in Egypt as well. You know, that's the goddess of the heavens, the queen of the stars, that kind of idea.